Okay, and that coincides nicely with today, which is World Oceans Day, which happens every June 8th. It's an initiative, a global initiative. It started, it came out of the United Nations Earth Summit in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, and it started as an idea and took a little while to come into existence. And Rachel, what do you know offhand? Which anniversary of World Ocean Day this is?
Don't.
It's in the 20s now, I think, but
it's been going on a while, but luckily gaining momentum.
It is gaining momentum. This year is big. There are events going on today and tonight all over the world, and we're thrilled to be a part of it. And World Oceans Day is this global celebration of our connection with the ocean that we share, and we all have a personal connection with the ocean somehow. Even by virtue of the fact that as humans, we are largely made up of salt water. And the oceans have always bound all the corners of the globe. And World Ocean Day is an initiative to raise our consciousness about the impact of our connection with the ocean and what that can cause, and then what we can do about it. And the ocean is a critical part of our planet, and it's a critical part of our planetary health. And it is a vitally important resource to conserve. And tonight, Rachel will talk about microplastics, among other things. And for many years, we knew that there were plastics in the ocean. We honestly had not been good stewards of the ocean for generations. And for folks who've spent a lot of time out in the water, you've seen over the years, whether in the water or on the edges, whether in populated areas or in remote locations. And there's nothing quite like sailing hundreds or thousands of miles to arrive at a shore that's just littered with plastic waste. And you can see it break down and become smaller in the water. And I was astonished to learn a long time ago that the half-life of plastic is at least 600 years, which means it's effectively forever. And so it gets into the environment and it stays there. And Rachel is a sailor, a captain. She is the founder of the Rozalia Project for a Clean Ocean, which is a research and education organization that's doing remarkable work. She is the inventor of the Cora Ball, and she has led expeditions. Papers are written, shared, publicly and through peer-reviewed journals. And she's spoken, in addition to our humble little venue, she's spoken on TEDx and at the Explorers Club in New York. And I think, Rachel, later today on World Oceans Day, you're going to be speaking to the Phoenix Yacht Club.
Yeah, that's a good thing about the virtual platform. Exactly. Phoenix this evening.
Rachel is captain. The vessel for the Rozalia Project is American Promise. And many of you may remember when Dodge Morgan had Ted Hood build it for him in Marblehead, so that Dodge could then go proceed to set the single-handed round the world, or break the single-handed round the world sailing record. And it's a remarkable book, a remarkable vessel. And the book about it, the original voyage of American Promise, about his trip and all the preparations for it, was one of the key pieces that led me to the sea full time. She's done all kinds of cool things, and I hope you get to read all of her biography. From teaching sailing to training Navy SEALs to find demolitions with underwater robots, to talking to students at the Harbor School and through the Tall Ships America conference, and even with the Girls Inc. group in Lynn, which we work with closely as well. And she's she's an educator, a mentor, an innovator, an explorer, and I'm really honored that she's with us here tonight. And just before I turn it over to Rachel for the presentation, the reason you're all here, I do want to tell everybody that she wins this year's award for Zoom meeting participation because in a meeting earlier this year, Rachel figured out how to attend and participate in a Zoom meeting while on a paddleboard in New Zealand. So without further ado, thanks everybody for coming. And Rachel, thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm really thrilled that you're able to join us.
Thank you. It is really exciting to be here. And I'll get to, we have some history with your organization and your gorgeous boat. So first, happy World Oceans Day to everyone. I'm going to get my screen rolling so you can look at some beautiful pictures as we go into some of our work and roll into with finishing how you can be part of the solution to the problems that I'm going to talk about as well. Okay, so let's dive in. I want to first explain who we are. Rozalia Project, like Stefan said, we're a nonprofit who's working to protect the ocean, and we've primarily been working on the problem of marine debris. What sets us apart from other marine debris organizations is that we have different strategies. So we're using 4 different strategies to address the problem. They are doing data cleanups, always collecting data, but cleaning up. Then the rest is about prevention. So prevention through education, embracing innovation and technology, and doing solutions-based research. We work on the surface to the seafloor. So clearly the shoreline is easiest to access. Stefan mentioned our vessel, which I'll get to. It helps us address the surface. And I'd like you to meet Hector the Collector. That's our ROV, or remotely operated vehicle. And Hector helps us get underwater without throwing anybody overboard to do more than just look and see what's under there, but to even collect it as well. You see his little gripper right there. We specifically work in urban and coastal waters. That's on purpose. With 80% of marine debris coming from the land-sea interface, we believe that that's where the most efficient and cost-effective work is needing to be done. And we thrive on great partnerships and really diverse partnerships, from funding partnerships to academic, to writing marine debris lessons for US sailing. And there you guys are. We've had the pleasure of rafting alongside of Adventure right after she got painted in 2014, which we really do appreciate. So that's our boat and your boat. And I've done some really fun and satisfying work with Maritime Gloucester as well, with cleanups and presentations. So it's fun to be back in Gloucester. We are optimistic. In the face of an overwhelming problem, we're optimistic because we recognize that the problem of ocean trash and plastic pollution and marine debris is one that's made by the collective we, and we believe that the collective we can overcome it. So Stefan mentioned this really happy guy and why he is so happy. Some of you may recognize him or maybe even know Dodge Morgan. We've actually met a Gloucester resident who is friends with Dodge Morgan. And so here he is. He's crossed the finish line at this very moment after having broken the solo circumnavigation record. So he sailed Bermuda to Bermuda, alone around the world without stopping. He was the first American to do so and held the world record starting in '86. It got broken by a French guy in a really lighter boat. But American Promise is a spectacular vessel. We're her 3rd owners. Dodge Morgan donated her to the Naval Academy, who used her for sail training. And like I said, we're the 3rd owners. Now, something besides the fact that she sails spectacularly, and I would love to talk about that in another conversation, is that we are keeping her out front as this time the greenest sailing research vessel in the world. So we do a lot of different strategies, but the ones I'd like to call to your attention are the renewables that we put on. So we changed out the not super efficient diesel for a tier 3 marine diesel in 2013. And then the next year we installed, or actually it was in 2015, we installed solar, wind, and hydropower. So the hydropower comes just where the A and the P of American Promise are. That arm flips down and there's a little propeller essentially that goes in the water. It generates an incredible amount of power while under sail. The other two, solar and wind, while we're not underway, while we're, actually they do it all the time. What am I saying? So the cool thing is that we've had these installed for the last 7 years of operations, and we have not turned our generator, nor have we plugged into shore power since that solar was put on. So we've had 100% of our house bank needs met by renewable power, which is great. In terms of the marine debris problem, we work on 3 categories: derelict fishing gear, consumer debris, so that's everyday items that we all kind of handle, and finally, microplastics. We think about this problem a lot. We think about it in terms of how do we get from the problem to solutions. And here's a kind of path to solutions model that we use to think about it. Our expertise is primarily in lab or field science, but recognizing that at the foundation of all of this is also lab science. So understanding the problem in its various ways, we believe, is the foundation for all of this before getting to solutions. The other parts of our expertise that you'll see as I keep talking in this presentation have to do in the solution side. And we have spectacular partners and work with people who are in the what I think is a very positive feedback loop of modeling, sensing, and monitoring. So in terms of solutions, you'll see that we have a lot of focus in taking the science that what we learn through our expeditions and sharing them through both education programs and awareness campaigns. And also we'll talk about some of the physical solution that we came up with. So this talk is going to focus on the category of microplastics. And I want to jump in with some definitions so we're all talking the same language. All right, here's a bunch of microplastic. We can think of microplastic in sort of 2 broad categories. One is primary, which is little bits of plastic that was already this small. It was designed to be under the accepted size of 5 millimeters, which is actually kind of big to be micro, but 5 millimeters is about half the width of your pinky nail. So something like a microbead, which has now been banned, that used to be in toothpaste and facial scrubs, glitter, which is still happening. Most glitter is plastic and it's very small. And then those are both consumer. And then a resin pellet, which is the raw material of plastic manufacturing. It looks like a little bead without the hole in it. The second type of microplastic is collectively considered secondary microplastic, which means that it's something that broke off of something bigger. So we have fibers that broke off of longer filaments, pieces of film that broke off of squishy or like plastic bags or Doritos bags or that kind of thing, like thin and malleable. And then of course, fragments, which would be chunks of plastics that broke off of others. So now we're all speaking the same language. Here's a little bit of scale of those microbeads. That's just a normal size tweezers. They can get small. This part of the microplastic problem is one that we've spent the most time on. I don't know, does anyone know what we're looking at? Or another way to word this is, have you seen microfiber pollution in sort of real life? Well, this is microfiber pollution. Now, what I'm talking about is our clothing and our home textiles and lots of other materials starting out being made of long filaments and those breaking into tiny, often microscopic pieces of fiber that are escaping into our environment. Now, the interesting part of this is that this is not so much as a situation of willful disobedience. This is something that's happening inadvertently. We wear clothes and this happens. Nobody meant for it to happen. But when you look at our clothes magnified, you see how it can. Our textiles are pretty vulnerable, and it depends on their material and how they're made, just how vulnerable they are to breaking. So just looking real quick from the top, that yellow, that's acrylic. Then we're looking at a polyester, 100% polyester. That would be something like a waterproof pair of shorts or something. The next one is magnified
Sometimes with your 4 pans and serve the
polyester
dishes,
that is
then
like a fleece.
we eat off paper plates.
Then we have
So it's like one less set. of dishes to
polyester
do.
cotton
And sometimes, I
blend
mean,
t-shirts.
it's 8 o'clock and I'm still washing the dinner dishes,
No
and I'm
one has
like,
ever.
he comes back from his mother's
Yeah.
house, and I'm like, yep, just got done cleaning the
Just a
kitchen.
quick heads up. There's a.
What is this, what's there?
Here we go. See if that's better. Okay, so there's some unknown bottom left corner. If you have a guess of what that is, type it in the chat. No one's ever guessed what this is. Just lay that out there. All right, let's let that sink in. The second from the left is essentially like your yoga pants. So polyester and lycra spandex. And let's see, the next one we have is linen cotton, and the last is all cotton, just to show you that all of our fabrics are vulnerable to breaking. Now, the magnitude of this problem is pretty big. There's a lot of different studies out there with a lot of numbers, but here's one of them, is that one fleece jacket could produce an average of over 81,000 individual pieces of microfiber per garment per wash. And another indicated that nearly 750,000 microscopic pieces of fiber could come off of one long sleeve collared shirt. Now, the thing is that washing machines are really just designed to collect things like coins or my business card that you leave in your pocket and wash inadvertently. They're really to protect your pipes. And so this is what can and does wash out of our washing machines. The way we collected this microfiber was by sieving, or putting the effluent water from our washing machine, doing a normal, this was a winter's load, through different size meshes, drying it and magnifying it. Now, the reason that we care about this problem is because it poses 2 categories of dangers to our marine food web. The first is physical. So when especially a very small creature ingests a little fuzzball that's full of synthetic or even natural fibers, it can cause blockage. So they can't eat any more food or have other types of problems. It can scrape the esophagus of a very small creature. Or what I think is a very horrific thing to have happen is that it does get it ingested into its little, say, plankton belly, and it's full, but full of something with no nutritional value. So the creature can't eat anything else because it's full, but it's not getting the nutrients it needs to reproduce and to live. And so it essentially starves with a full belly. And, you know, I just realized I never told you what the answer to that I'm just gonna go back here. Somebody did guess. I appreciate the guess, John. They guessed Velcro. That is an excellent guess, but this is neoprene. Isn't that fascinating? So a wetsuit under magnifying glasses or magnification digital microscope. All right, thanks for the reminder on that. All right, so we'll carry on with the chemical potential dangers associated with chemicals that can have a toxic effect. So a lot of plastic is inert. We use it in medical applications, and it can live in our bodies or in other bodies without there being a problem. But one thing that has been shown to happen in the ocean is that plastic, even if itself is inert, can act as essentially a magnet for toxic chemicals, persistent organic pollutants, such as PCBs or PBDEs, which are flame retardants. So it can end up having this associated harmful chemical involved. And when creatures ingest marine-borne plastic, there is the possibility that there's, and this has been shown in labs, a transfer of these persistent organic pollutants from the marine-borne plastic into more than just the guts of animals, but into their tissue, into their blood and beyond. And this isn't just about the synthetics. The textile industry is permitted, which is a whole nother topic, to use chemicals that are not shared with us. Their ingredients aren't shared, and they range everything from optical brighteners to wrinkle releasers. I'm not drinking any of those things. I would prefer not to. And yet they can make their way through our washing machines and the release of these fibers into our public waterways. And what's important to remember is that what is ingested by the sea creatures is ingested by us. A study by Chelsea Rockman from the University of Toronto's lab went to fish markets in California. They got fish that was destined for our collective plates. And they found that 1 in 3 shellfish, 1 in 4 finfish, and 67% of all the species they tested, and again, these weren't randomly caught in the ocean, they were at a fish market, had microplastic, mostly microfiber in them. In fact, since that study's been done, over 220 species have been shown to ingest microplastic. These are some really quite extraordinary pictures of plankton, very small creatures by a colleague, Matt Cole from Plymouth Marine Lab. And these are showing he's got the plastics fluorescing in a special microscope situation, which is pretty cool. You can see how they're ingested, which clearly is not that cool. But this is happening. Now, it's also been found, microfiber this is, in tap water. Tap water tested around the world. This is from a report put out by Orb Media. These are the number of samples of tap water that had microfiber in them. And I am not driving you to drink bottled water by sharing that statistic, because bottled water globally also had a similar result from the same, a subsequent study from the same organization. Microfibers also been found in honey, salt, chicken, and beer. All right, so that's pretty bad news. When we learned about the problem of microfiber pollution, we being our Rozalia Project team, it was one of those problems that screamed at us. It didn't just whisper or speak to us. It screamed at us. And so we set out to try to accomplish 3 goals. One was to understand more about the problem and contribute to information or the science that was pretty scant at the time. This was back in 2013. We didn't discover it, but we learned about it pretty early. 2 was to come up with a solution to see if we could stop this from happening. And 3, raise awareness about the problem, spread the word to inspire innovators in the many industries that can have an impact on reducing this problem. So on the goal of understanding the problem better and contributing to the science, we set out to find microfiber in the wild. And that's what you're looking at. This is microfiber from the Hudson River. The part of the wild that we went to was the Hudson River, because it's a pretty incredible place to do this study. It starts up high in the Adirondack Mountains at Lake Tier of the Clouds in a very remote, no people allowed to live there, but fairly intense recreational area. And it meanders through 20% doesn't even have wastewater treatment plants, and then rural, but populated, suburban. Albany is kind of a small city. It gets agricultural, and then you end up with Manhattan and New Jersey before the Hudson meets the Atlantic at Ambrose Light. And so we sampled the Hudson, all of it, every 3 miles from Lake Tier of the Clouds to Ambrose Light. This was in 2016. We used a combination of American Promise, our feet, whitewater rafting, and we learned something interesting. Our hypothesis was centered around wastewater treatment plants being the significant factor here. And we expected a heat map that kind of looked like the scale just turned 90 degrees clockwise, where it would be very red with lots of fiber down near New York and really no fiber up in the mountains. But interestingly, that's not what we found exactly. So we did underscore the involvement of our washing machines and wastewater treatment plant, because that bright red down in the middle here, north of New York City, but halfway to Green Island, that's around Poughkeepsie. That was the location that was closest to a wastewater treatment plant. And that had some of the most amount of fibers. But here's the crazy thing. The other hotspots were above wastewater treatment. And overall, there was no statistically significant difference in concentration across the whole river. And so that was really fascinating to us because it said, yes, this is about wastewater treatment and washing machines. However, there's something else at play. These were our hot spots, which is pretty incredible. So when your science ends up with more questions, then the best thing to do is go back and try to answer them. And so that's what we did. Thank goodness we did it in 2019 with the help of National Geographic funding. And we sampled the Hudson River again. But this time, not only did we do the surface, but we also looked at the air. So we had 2 heights of air. So when we were on American Promise from Ambrose Light to Albany, we went 3/4 of the way up the mast and then everywhere else at my inhalation height. As the principal investigator, I get to pick these things. So the lower air sample was somewhere in the 5-foot range where I breathe. Soil was sampled as well because so the air is showing what is in suspension. We use little pumps. So that was what was already in the air. We want to see is there microplastic floating around. We looked at the soil. So that would represent either atmospheric deposition, so coming out of the air, or some kind of land-based sources. We looked at the surface again, because we need to know that, and we already did. We want to compare those data. And then we looked at the water column. So halfway between the surface and the seafloor or the river bottom, and then 1 meter above the river bottom as well. We also had a look at nanoplastics with a partner who's using some advanced imaging techniques to see if we can detect nanoplastics. This expedition was also really exciting for me in particular because we supported science enabling innovation on this expedition. One was this stuff, it looks just like normal tape, but it really makes a very big difference in being able to do this level of science. So publishable, peer review publishable science from a sailing vessel. Exactly American Promise, like you've already seen. And we wanted to show that that was possible. The second is this manta ray, which is an in situ, so in the water, microplastic sampler. So with a pump and this laser, essentially, an FTIR is called, infrared, that looks at everything that goes by and it can count and determine what is in there. So they were doing some ground truthing to compare their results with our results using the current state-of-the-art methods of collecting a grab sample, filtering it, and then looking through microscopes. So those are our expeditions, and our results our data are still being written up. I can't wait to hopefully come back with you in maybe a year, and I will share all of the data that comes out of that. But early results say that we have some useful information that can really help point to sources, which is what we want to do, which can ultimately help prevent this from happening. Now, remember I said that there's got to be something else besides wastewater treatment plants based on our 2016 expedition results. And back in October of 2016, once figuring that out, the first thing I did was go outside my dryer. I live in Vermont. We have it's right sort of my height level, the dryer exhaust, and found that something else is going on. And one of those things that's going on is that it's not just about washing, but it's also about drying as well. And a colleague of mine who is based out in near Jackson, Wyoming, she and I did a sort of pandemic research project and looked at dryer emissions. What enabled that was snow for us, which made the actual science much easier. And we made a grid pattern outside of our vents, then ran one bright pink blanket and collected from each of the locations, counted all of the fibers, and looked at 2 things. One was the distribution of fibers coming out of the dryer vent. This first part shouldn't surprise you at all. Most of the fibers that came out of the dryer vent fell within 5 feet of the dryer vent. But if you look, there's a semicircle of the 30-foot locations around sort of a half circle around our house. And we found fiber even in those, even 90 degrees to the we tried to do it on days with no wind, but a couple of the days there was a little bit of northerly and southerly, which goes along the axis of the house. And we found fiber everywhere. So that was interesting. We need some more science to go farther than 30 feet. And then we put a bag on the outside of our dryer vent, and then we just caught what was in there to see, well, okay, what's coming out? This is from one single fleece blanket in the drum at a time. And I think this is really interesting. There was a huge difference between my colleague's Kirsten's dryer and my own. So location 1 is on the top and location 2 is on the bottom. Mine is a brand new dryer with a very short ducting. It's right against the wall. Hers is a very old dryer with a very long situation of ducting. We think she might have a fire hazard on her hands, and this will be like science to save a house in addition to science to save the ocean. So we're working on that, but this is what came out. So each of the vertical rows or vertical columns are one blanket dried one time. So this is the same blanket dried once, then another incident where it was just soaked and then dried, and then a third time. So there's a reduction over time, which is what we expected. And then because we were also curious and we could collect this at the same time, we looked at the effectiveness of the dryer, the lint traps. And we also found a pretty big difference in lint trap catch between the two systems. And that gives me a lot of hope for relatively rapid solution finding if we can identify which lint traps are the most effective. So the last piece of science is very new. Like, it's not published yet. Please do not tweet this information. You're the first people to whom I am sharing this information. In fact, we haven't submitted it yet, and we're planning to do that within the next couple weeks. So not to be shared, but we also did a contamination study. And so what this looked at is, well, when people go out and do these studies, including ourselves, we do a lot of protocols to keep contamination out of our samples. And that means washing our hands and not wearing anything on our wrists and triple rinsing all the equipment, stuff like that. And we wanted to know, how much is that working? Part of it was, for me, I want to do a microplastic citizen science monitoring project that's real, that's robust. That means that the people involved are contributing to science, not just doing an exercise. But if we think that everybody is just hemorrhaging fiber into the samples, then it would just be a scientific exercise. It wouldn't be robust. And so we wanted to see what was going on and if we could control it. And so I'm sharing with you for the first time, my conclusion is we are all pig pen. But instead of dirt poofing off of us, it's basically microfiber poofing off of us from our clothes. What we found is that even when we were as careful as the current procedural contamination protocols allow for, we still had 35% of what was in our samples came from contamination, most of that from our own clothes. And we were able to tell that because we scraped our clothes and then matched fiber against fiber. So if we found a fiber in the sample and it was blue of a particular shape, we knew that that was from our t-shirts. But what's even more noteworthy is that if we didn't use protocols, the contamination in the sample was right around 70%, which is a pretty incredible finding. So more on that later as well. So that is all the bad news. I am done with talking about the problem. It's all about solutions from now. And so one solution I want to share with you is our own. And this was part of the second goal that we had when we learned about microfiber pollution, which was, can we figure out how to stop the problem? One of the ways. And one of the ways we came up to stop the problem is for consumers to use something in their washing machine. This is the Cora Ball. It's named after coral because that's what inspired it. It's made from recycled and recyclable material. We paid a lot of attention to our supply chain and transport. It's made entirely in Vermont and shipped from here. We pay a lot of attention to our packaging as well. It's easy to use. You throw or drop it in your washing machine. That's it. And like I said, its shape was inspired by coral. So it's got little stalks, and just like coral is kind of stuck to a rock and it collects little bits of plankton that float by, The Cora Ball isn't stopped, but it does collect small things from moving water. So here's what it looks like in action. It moves with, not against your clothes, and cruises around, and it collects some of the fiber. It certainly does not collect all of the fiber. And here's what it looks like. You end up with a fuzz ball. You pinch it out just like cleaning a hairbrush. Now, to your naked eye, these fuzz balls look like, for lack of a better term, a hairball. But when we put the digital microscope on it, you'll see that hairball is actually microfiber. Hair is that big brown thing across the right side. And that microfiber, those were lots and lots of pieces of microfiber. And the stubby pencil will show you that that was a very small piece of fuzz with a lot of microfiber in it. And so that is our way to get started stopping this problem. We are not the only solution, we're one of the solutions. There's been multiple independent peer-reviewed published papers looking at the efficiency of the Cora Ball and how collective action will make a difference here. So yeah, you'll make a difference just using a Cora Ball yourself because you can catch up to 31%, but it also reduces shedding. So it protects the ocean and your clothes. But a whole community using something like this can really make an impact. So our work isn't just about our own research or our own innovation or anything like that. We are taking what we learned from our experiences developing the Cora Ball and doing this science and turning them into microplastic education programs. So we have multiple activities, in particular, a microfiber activity. We've now partnered with NOAA, the Blue Ocean Society, and Booth-Bay Sea and Science Center, and we have a teacher kit. So if someone's interested in that, we're going to share my email address. You can check in with me and we can get that to you. It's got the curriculum or the lesson plans for our microfiber activities. It's incredibly fun science that isn't just for boys, it's for girls too, everybody. These were from some yacht club stops that we did in 2019. It works really well in both formal and informal settings. We call it bikini science, because sometimes you just got to stop your sailing program and do some STEM education. Little bit rowdy, I love it. So I'm going to finish with a little bit about solutions and how you can be part of it. So first, my own philosophies about solutions. All right, first of all, it needs to be solutions. This is a plural. The only way we're going to do this is with multiple solutions. And that's whether we're talking about microplastic, derelict fishing gear, marine debris, or even just one part of it, like plastic bags. It's going to take multiple ways. People frequently ask me, if you could do one thing, what would it be? And I usually want to say, but I just said it can't be one thing. It needs to be solutions. But when pressed, my wish for the one thing is that we have a universal human mind meld. And the result is that we all see value in every single thing, that every object and everything that we see, use, or come in contact with has value. Sometimes that's positive value, sometimes it's negative. And by doing that, trash should no longer be a thing. This term is from our partners at MIT's Environmental Solutions Initiative. But I believe that not only is it about solutions, plural, but it's also about what they call radical interdisciplinarity, which means we need policy people, we need accountants, we need moms, we need teachers and scientists and sailors and people who simply love the ocean, and maybe people who aren't sailors but love the ocean. The more disciplines and experiences that are involved that go towards solving these problems, I think the more effective they will be. The next is that lots of littles make a big. What this means for me is that you take a problem like microfiber, one microfiber in the ocean is probably going to be just fine. But lots and lots of little problems make a big danger. And lots of little efforts to fix it make big positive impact. But it's not just about the individuals. My last kind of solution philosophy does recognize that large corporations cut a wide path. And while I respect the organizations that go on a sort of activist route, Rozalia Project and myself, we tend to want a seat at the table, shoulder to shoulder with the Cokes and Pepsis, with our data and our experiences to say, make these changes, it will enable other changes to be made. So, all right, I'm going to do rapid fire. This is going to go quick. I'm going to share with you my favorite innovations and solutions, going more or less in order of these solutions. All right. If you want information about any of these, this will be shared, or just remember the one you like and email me. I'll give you some more info. Here we go. Education, MIT, they have all these schools, but they brought them all together for some radical interdisciplinarity to specifically work on plastics. Our partner for the Hudson River trip, the second one, was actually from the School of Law, Policing, and Forensics. It was the crime scene fiber experts that we teamed up with to learn more and bring fiber forensics, where people's lives depend on it, over to, it was actually my partner, Dr. Claire Gwinnett's idea to bring her knowledge of forensics over to marine science. It's spectacular. There's been some incredible messaging campaigns, ones that are already successful, like Ban the Bead, ones that need to be successful. And it sounds like there's already some motion in your area about this. Balloons, we can do better than balloon releases. In terms of messaging, sometimes art is the better way over words, like art to show that storm drains are connected to our waterways. And sometimes it's taking trash and turning it into something quite striking and beautiful. This artist, Cindy Peasrow, the second from the right, she makes incredible art. And then she helps people like us make somewhat less incredible art, but we have a really good time. In regulation and policy, there's motion happening at our federal government level with the Save Our Seas Act of 2018, and then there's been more. And then there's individual bans, and this is pretty interesting because there's plastic bag bans, and then there's areas that are looking to ban the bag ban the ability to have bans, and then there's people who want to ban the banning of bans. It's a little bit complicated, but it's important we have people working on this. In terms of innovation and redesign, there is a need for polymers, for plastics, but they don't all have to be extractive fossil fuels that are virgin to landfill. They can be made of other things, like straws made of algae, like agricultural plastic made of tree lignin that you just plow into the field at the end of your summer or your growing season. Messaging can happen in something that everyone on this call, and we use this. We have two of our data cards on the marine debris tracker. This helps us collectively keep track of what's out there, because not everyone needs a straw ban, but some people need a straw ban. And so these data points are what convinces everyone from a restaurant to a town council, educates about what the problem is and what will fix it. There's some very clever redesigns out there, or upcycling. These are 2-liter bottles on an island. I've seen this happening on an island off the coast of Jakarta, and it happens all over the world. They're called eco bricks. These are 2-liter bottles stuffed with non-recyclable films type soft plastic. So like cleaned potato chip bags, and we made some candy bar wrappers. These are from a company called Borreo. They're skateboards made from what would have been discarded fishing nets. Instead, they buy the nets from the fishermen and upcycle them into skateboards and now sunglasses. And then you can have one that isn't necessarily earth-shattering, but just replacing plastic with spaghetti to stir your coffee. In terms of infrastructure, out of the Netherlands is a bubble barrier, because you can't just put a boom over the canals. You need fish and you need ships to pass through. So they use bubbles to divert the stuff that can't swim on its own, like the trash, and everything else can get through. And then where you can put a boom, there's something as spectacular as the Mr. Trash Wheel of Baltimore, which sucks up all of this stuff on this slide per year. And it works without any electricity at all. The flow of the river itself powers it. There's ways to do recycling that aren't just chopping things up, melting it back, and turning it into something worse, which is what's happening a lot of the times. There are ways to return plastics to their original polymer level, and you can get a food grade or same cycled result, which is pretty incredible. And then we can even use financial instruments to encourage the stopping of this problem, particularly through infrastructure projects, really all over the world. There's an organization called the Plastic Bank that's turned trash picking and the trash itself into a currency. And then there's science itself as a solution, because I can show you that this also works. There are studies that have had incredible impact, like this one that is now resulting in a huge number of infrastructure projects happening, especially in Southeast Asia. And then there's another study that looked at rivers around the world and said that these rivers are responsible for an incredible amount of plastic into our world's one big ocean. And so countries that were implicated didn't like it, like Indonesia. And look at these before pictures, just there on the right. This is a river. I'm going to zoom in. Before that paper came out and after that paper came out. This is a direct result of published science. It's pretty incredible. So I'm going to leave with two things. One, that you can make an impact, and then we'll figure out how you can make an impact. Okay, this is how much impact you can make. For example, everybody get your fingers ready for typing. Both of these final activities are an opportunity to be involved. All right, so get your chat windows open, warm up your fingers and your brain. Okay, the first is numbers. How many pieces of 1 millimeter microplastic do you think one standard sized single-use water bottle might create? I'll tell you straight, it's not a million. It's less than that. So it's pretty big. Millimeter is actually kind of big-ish, sort of pinhead size. So what happens to plastic when it gets left in the environment? There's some work being done trying to figure out exactly. But one thing we do know is that it doesn't dissolve. It doesn't biodegrade. If it's a fossil fuel-based plastic, it turns into microplastic. All right, we've got some guesses. Nice. All right, these are good guesses. I can't scroll all the way. I'm gonna give Tony is the closest, a little bit over. We're not playing The Price is Right. So Tony wins this. 39,000 individual pieces of microplastic from one water bottle. All right, let's go with a single-use plastic grocery bag. So it's kind of bigger, flat. Give me some numbers. It is bigger than any numbers that anyone guessed last time. There's a hint for you. All right, give me some numbers. All right, we got a couple. Boom, nearly 500,000 pieces. So here's how the impact is straight up. Don't let a plastic bag either exist or make it to the water, and straight away you have kept nearly 500,000 pieces of microplastic, which are really hard to remove from our ocean. Okay, I'm going to now, for the last thing, is reintroduce you to the Venn diagram. The inspiration for this came from a great podcast from Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson and her partner. The podcast is called How to Save a Planet. So, all right, again, get your fingers ready. We're going to start with thinking the goal of this activity is to zero in on what you can do to make an impact for a clean ocean. All right, this is what you can do, what suits you particularly. So, what do you love? Tell me something that you love. You don't have to press send yet, just put a comma after it. So write something that you love. Here's some examples on broad categories. People often love children, especially their own, but everybody's. Words, animals, design. Here's some more specific things that people love. Yes, gardens. My mom loves gardening too. Fishing, Gloucester. There's people on this that love Gloucester. I bet there's people that love the Stellwagen Bank. Turtles, sailing, me too, Bill. Oh, bicycling, I do too. Flowers, I love it. Okay, good. So now keep that in mind. All right, so we're gonna say, what do you love? Now we're gonna look at what you're good at. So this is sounding familiar. Maybe we're starting with the classic, what should you do for work Venn diagram, but we're gonna tweak it. All right, what are you good at? Are you good at things like this? Perhaps you're good at something like this. Connecting people. Maybe you're good at photos. I have something for you to do if all you're good at is taking a walk in the same place every day. That is going to have value to us in this particular Venn diagram exercise. So think about, oh, I love that, telling stories. Think about what you're good at. So we've got, what do you love and what are you good at? Okay, now we're going to go with drawing. Awesome. That's it. That's also going to be useful. I had that on my list. We want to think about what the ocean needs as the last part of this exercise, but I want to put a caveat on it that interests you. So the goal here is to find the intersection, that's what Venn diagrams are good at, of these three elements. So what does the ocean need? It might mean something very specific, like storytellers, like something to prevent the trash, but it also might need, we can look at it on the sort of biology side, like the ocean needs biodiversity. The ocean needs icebergs. The ocean needs plankton. And so, yes, the ocean needs marine protected areas. Completely agree with you, Bill. So we've got, what do you love? What are you good at? And what the ocean needs. And I couldn't resist making it sparkly. But the intersection of these three things is your ocean impact. And so I've done one for myself. I thought that was only fair. So I love swimming and sailing in a clean ocean. I get very grossed out when there's stuff in the water, but I can do dark water and cold water, all that stuff. I'm good at getting projects going. I'm a sort of front end, push it forward person, sort of a front end idea, get it going, assemble a team. I love that. And something that I am particularly interested that the ocean needs there to be less trash. And so the intersection for me is was founding Rozalia Project for a Clean Ocean. That suits my whole getting new projects going thing. It very specifically was about trash, and it helps me achieve the thing I love. So I want to wrap up with an offer to help you find your specific impact. I think we might need to do it sort of after the kit. Oh, I'll answer that in a second. After the fact is I'm going to share my info with you, and I will provide an ocean Venn diagram suggestion service. So if you send me what you love and what you're good at, and something about the ocean that interests you, one of the ocean's challenges or something the ocean needs that you like, I will help you figure out how you can make the most impact. I can guess that Betsy, who's been doing such a spectacular job with this whole program, her Venn diagrams center is as development director for Schooner Adventure. I'm guessing that she's got some of those three elements, that's what puts her there. And there'll be a second Venn diagram for Betsy and for everyone that's maybe not professional, but just personal. So I gave an example of the person walking in the same place. So maybe they love their dog and they are good at taking their dog to the beach every day at the same time. The ocean needs ongoing data sets. And so I could tell you that person with those three bits of a Venn diagram could be using the marine debris tracker to add a beach cleanup component to those daily walks and upload it just with their phone. And they will be making very important contributions to the understanding of the trash situation in their location. So I want to leave it with you thinking about what your Venn diagram for the ocean is on this World Ocean Day, to say I will help you if you would like some help figuring out what's right there in the middle. And to thank you again for having me. I, of course, would love to be there in person, and maybe that'll happen in the future. I can share our future results. And I can't wait to come sailing because I've only been on her when she's on the dock. So thank you, Captain Edic and Betsy and Greg and Maureen and the whole team who is part of this organization. I think you guys are awesome and appreciate the opportunity. So I will start by answering, well, actually, is it okay if I start answering Tony's question? Greg and Maureen?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sweet. Here, I'll also stop my share. Okay, so Rozalia is my great grandmother. It is the person for whom I was named. So I'm Rachel. Jewish people just use letters, not whole names in general. I was the first granddaughter. I was actually born on the second anniversary of her death. So I never knew her myself, but she was my fairy great grandmother. She's my great grandmother. And I was very, very, very close with her daughter, my beloved grandmother. And they came over from Russia when it was a bad time to be Jewish people in Russia in the 1920s, they came by boat, they came by sea. So the sea for our family, like probably many of yours, was the literal path to a better life. And then as a side, we also did look for we had some other ideas for like clean ocean, whatever. And even if we could find the .com or .org, they were so boring. So my husband thought, well, let's name it after the boat that my grandmother and great grandmother came over on from Russia. And we went to Ellis Island and we have all the documents and it was really exciting. We uncovered the boat and it was called the SS Madonna. Like, there's no way in which that could possibly work on any level. And so we're there. Actually, all this paperwork is at a Jewish History Museum in Philadelphia. So we had passports and name change documents and all this stuff. And as we're looking through it, my husband is a very good big picture thinker. He's kind of looking through and he said, you know, what if we just named it after the mover shaker in the family, the one who kind of made it all happen. And so that's what we did. Thank you for the question.
Do we have any other questions? I can't see all of you, and I believe you're all muted, so maybe in the chat is the best place. But I'm wondering, Rachel, well, on a personal level, I'm wondering those magic eraser sponges, are those terrible?
I have no idea. I wonder about that all the time.
They work great to wash the tub.
It's incredible. You
I'm
know,
afraid I'm making things worse when I wash the tub.
it is definitely a ablative situation.
Yeah, they kind of disappear as you use them.
I'm gonna figure it out.
Okay.
I got a little team. I'm gonna figure that out. Because you're right, I've used them as well, and I think, oh my God, this is doing everything I wanted to do, but where is it going? And what is it? You know, it's not like baking soda based. So,
Right.
it's an excellent question.
So
I've written it down.
another question I was thinking about is, what about clothing manufacturers? Is there a way to get fashion people involved? What do you think about that?
So the good news is that there are coalitions of fashion houses, and they run from the outdoor apparel industry groups like Patagonia. Adidas has been really involved. Of course, Nike, because they, you know, and also like Lululemon, they've all been involved, to Stella McCartney, Marks and Spencer, which is a very big clothing company in the UK. So there's a fairly diverse, could use more companies, but there is some motion. And I think the most exciting thing that's happening on the textile industry side of all this is that there's an organization called the Marine Consortium, and they're working on a shedding quotient. And so I think one of the most important things we need to understand is, you know, if you think of that slide I had with the 8 different fabrics, I mean, there's so many different ways to make a textile, and we don't necessarily just know which are the most resilient. And so there's different ways to handle this. There's one way is to say, all right, what's the percentage of resiliency increase can we get from our textile production? And that's interesting because it includes a bunch of industries up there. So on the synthetic side, the people who make the resin pellets, the extruders, so going from a resin pellet to a filament, and then the people who weave all that into a textile, as well as the clothing designers. So what's nice about that knowledge is it will be a springboard for innovation in a large group of industries, sort of related. And that's a good sign. And once that exists, then there'll be other opportunities for us as consumers to have opportunities to buy more resilient clothing. You know, the goal, there is motion happening from the fashion industry.
There's a related, you want to read that?
We do have another question from David O'Hara. Should we be concerned about natural fibers as much as artificial ones? Which is a good question.
This is a great question. Okay, there's two ways to think of this. On the urgency priority side, the synthetics pose a greater overall risk to our marine ecosystem and potentially the human food web and human biological systems as well. So that would be from a risk standpoint. However, that's known risk. Unless something is certified organic down to the dyes, it is reasonable to assume that there are chemicals associated with even naturally derived textiles like a cotton or a viscose or something like that, that are not something that we want in our public waterways that provide ultimate drinking water. They're not something we want in any part of our marine food web, and certainly not something that we would want to drink the remnants of. And for that reason, we designed the Cora Ball to be what we call an equal opportunity fiber catcher. This is about collecting all of the man-made, or the sort of scientific collective term for man-made things would be anthropogenic. We want to collect all of the anthropogenic fibers out there. So if it didn't come off of a tree or a plant, then I would prefer it wasn't in our ocean, lakes, or rivers. So that's the sort of two sides to
That
that.
was my question.
So Rachel, there's another question from Tony. Save the Harbor, Save the Bay in Boston was teaching students how the harbor was cleaned up in the 70s. We all know that Boston Harbor was a dreadful place. Love that dirty water, right?
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that project back then and how maybe it relates to some of today's conservation work for oceans?
You know, it's funny. I'm not familiar with the details, but I can say that I went to Brown University and I was on the sailing team. And since I grew up in upstate New York, I was, so we sailed 420s. I was smarter than I was fast. So I was better at shifts. The people who were really fast but didn't really know where to go, they went to race at like Yale where there was a sea breeze and you just went right and then just be faster than everyone with one tack. But my strength here was about like tactics and stuff. So I raced on the Charles pretty much my whole college sailing career. And honestly, we wore dry suits in nearly all the conditions because we didn't want to touch the water. And that was a little bit more chemical than trash related. But I will tell you that zoom forward to Rozalia Project, and we've partnered with Community Boating and Courageous Sailing right from our very first year in 2010. And I have actually, one of those years, was it 2011? That was the year, it was 2011. That was the year that the Charles was open for swimming. It was either 2011 or 2012. And what a spectacular, so I've seen that myself, but Tony, thank you so much for the suggestion. We'd be happy to, one of our things is to partner with local groups and share our activities for education and to share our work and then hopefully set them off on their own version of doing the same thing. So if there's, so freely share my contact information or send me a person. We also have a great executive director for Rozalia Project, Ashley Sullivan. She's spectacular. And she does a lot of this stuff too. Yeah.
Thank you. I see that Peter Vandermark has a question. Peter,
She's still with us.
are you still with us?
I think he may have had to
Oh.
leave.
I'm sorry, Peter, we didn't get to you. Okay, well, I think we probably don't have time for all the questions that are in the chat, but let's do maybe a couple of more.
Yeah, another one from Tony is, if one Cora Ball is good, would it be better to have 10 in each load of laundry?
So we did test that and I'm looking for my favorite little prop, but I can't find it. So I'll use 2 Cora Balls because I have them. So we thought that as well. You know, if one is 30%, can we do 3 and like boost into the 90s? But that's not what happens. So in all of our tests, we did get a little bit of a bump, but it wasn't a big bump. And here's why, is I think what's happening is sometimes the second Cora Ball follows behind the first. And so the water, this water with the fibers in it kind of hits here. And this Cora Ball isn't really getting fresh water. Like it's not able to clean new parts of the water. If we could guarantee that they cruised around like this, then I think we would see the increase that made more sense, like exponentially. So we generally only recommend one, just keeps the cost down and stuff like that. Unless you have a really huge washing machine, then more. So I did have a fascinating conversation 2 days ago with a jeans company in Turkey. They told me about washing machines that they use that have 200 jeans at once. And that's how they do the distressing, and that like the initial wash with 200 pairs of jeans in one washing machine. And they wanted, we want to talk about what could a Cora Ball do? Does it need to be bigger or smaller? Like, do there need to be 1 million of them with a lot of surface area, like in and around the jeans? Or do we have made one the size of a basketball at our 3D printer, which I don't think is the way to go.
One last question here from Liz Fletcher. What do we do with the fibers that we pick out of the Cora Ball?
Such a good question. I forgot to put it into the talk here, so I appreciate this question. So here's the thing. Do you take your dryer lint and put it in the trash already? That's pretty much it. It's the same stuff. There has yet to be an upcycling or even recycling solution for our collective laundry lint. We've just never been able to catch our washing lint before. We've only been able to catch the drying lint. And so for now, you'll have to do with your washer lint the same thing that you do with your dryer lint. I can tell you that even with the bad rap that wastewater treatment plants get as far as potential microplastic leakage goes, it is still less guaranteed, it is less likely to make it to our public waterways to be what we call bioavailable if you put it in the trash. Now, some places do waste to energy, so that's a pretty good, while that may or may not be ideal, it's a different conversation. As far as microfibers go, they'll at least be not going to landfill, which is certainly, it's better than landfill. So for now, that's what you're gonna have to do. But here's last little hopeful bit. We're working with various innovators. Like, this is a problem people are trying to solve. People are trying to take mixed waste plastics and turn them into something that has value. The problem with our collective laundry lint, whether it's washer or dryer, is the lack of uniformity. It is a very heterogeneous thing. So if we took everybody on the top row, whatever your top row is, there's 5 or maybe there's a couple people in the screen, and we wrote down all the fabrics that we were, oh, that's cool. Using it as paper, I love that. And we wrote down all the fabrics that we collectively are wearing, the 5 or 7 of us on my screen. We could have 25 or 30 different textiles, different synthetics, different naturally derived, and they have different tensile strengths, different melt temperatures. Some are flammable, some may not be. And that's a very hard, that's a big ask out of a, that's a big ask for something. It can't be flammable to be insulation, which would be sort of feels like a no-brainer, but that might be scary. And then fill of some kind might be good. I've heard talk of mixing with concrete. That clearly needs to be studied before we put structural, like there needs to be structural integrity testing for that. So stuff your own pillows. I love that idea. I actually don't have any reason why that wouldn't work. Dry it out. Oh my God, if somebody makes a laundry lint pillow, I will carry it with me in my talks around the world.
I'm gonna send you one.
I did work with an extraordinary extraordinary student at the New York Harbor School. I was his advisor for his science project, and he worked on upcycling microfibers from laundry lint, and he made hats. And they're not quite ready for us all to wear, but it was a cool effort. So we kind of felted it a little bit.
Yeah, you're making your own felt. Yep.
Yeah. Now, thank you for the question. Thank you for all the questions.
Well, I'm just wondering if Peter Vandermark is there again. He could ask the final question, and if not, we can move ahead.
He was here, but I don't know.
I guess he's gone. Okay, well, Stefan, I think it's back to you, but Rachel, it's been just such a pleasure for this wonderful, informative talk this evening, and thank you so much for
Thank
doing
you.
all this work.
Thank you. It's
Great.
my pleasure. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thanks. I think that all deserves a hand. Rachel, that's brilliant. Thank you. And Greg, Maureen, Betsy, thank you. And thank you everybody for being here. I learn not just one or two, but lots of new things every time I see Rachel speak. And so I'm really, really honored that she was able to join us tonight. And I'm excited to announce that Rachel and I have been talking about bringing the Rozalia curriculum and education program to a small outpost like Adventure. So we can
Yay.
start introducing it to our students when we have the opportunity to ramp our education programs back up again. So
Then you can see, can I add real quick, Stefan? When that happens, we'd love for you to come and see American Promise. Everybody, when we do that, we'll have an open boat of some sort, and we'd love for you to come and meet the crew and check out the boat and all of her history. And we have fun little activities and things like that, or just hang out on the boat. So we appreciate that.
that would be wonderful. I've seen American Promise underway and at the dock. What I haven't ever done is touch American Promise, and that's a vessel that I hold in such veneration from Dodge and that book. So again, everybody, thank you, and thank you all for being part of the adventure community. Together, we are making some really good things happen. So thank you all for being here. If you have more questions for Rachel, if you think about them, if you haven't jotted down Rachel's contact information, send your questions to us and we'll send them to Rachel, and she and her team will answer them for you. So have a good night, everybody, and take care. Stay cool.